Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's show. I'm James, and I'm here with my friend Randy. And today we're going to discuss a topic that gets to, I think, the heart of what the Passionately Wrong podcast is trying to address. And that is, today, do smart people always agree? And we could just as easily say, do people always agree? But we want to make this a little bit more challenging by saying, all right, under the best of circumstances, when people are acting in good faith, well-meaning, reasonably smart, they still often come to different conclusions about topics. And that's a really interesting phenomenon if you think about it. I've observed this firsthand myself many times. I have lots of what I would call really smart friends, yourself included, Randy, who are thoughtful and come at issues carefully and yet nonetheless come to different conclusions. And I've seen that happen often enough now. And of course, everyone has their own examples of seeing that play out on the national stage on things like politics, for example. But the question we should be asking ourselves is, why does that happen, that people disagree fundamentally on fundamental issues? Or maybe I'll start with a different question to you, Randy, just to make sure we're addressing this the right way. Is my setup actually correct? Do you think it's true that people disagree on topics? Smart people disagree, or is one just obviously wrong and one is obviously right? What's going on here?
James, I think that it depends on a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. I think it depends on let's just talk about two individuals. Let's not talk about a gang having different opinions. So I think two people will come from different knowledge bases, sources, whether it's they specialize in two different things, and then they get their source of information on whatever topic we're discussing from different news sources than each other, or Google or YouTube things that they watch or podcasts that they listen to. So they, especially nowadays, a lot of podcasts and news channels are polarized one way or the other. So they may leave out certain things. And so since they're getting information from two different polarized sources, they may be smart people that just aren't well-rounded, and therefore they only know what input has been given to them. I also think that there's something to be said about someone who is book smart and street smart. And I see that a lot in the Army. In fact, the Army's almost created that way because the officers who are usually in charge are college educated. Even whether they went to West Point or they went to UT, they have to have a college degree to become an officer. And the enlisted, normally, majority of us aren't educated, don't have a college education when we come in, though there are a few. And as we progress, a good number of us will get college education as we stay in the military to get promoted. It helps us get promoted and helps us in our jobs. And we understand that we need a college education a lot of times to do what we want to do when we actually separate from the military or retire. So we pursue those degrees. But when a lieutenant comes out of college and is put in charge of a bunch of people, and then inevitably there are at least one, the platoon sergeant, because he'll be a platoon leader in the beginning. The platoon sergeant will have been in the military for over 10 years with, you can't argue that he has street smart, that he's been there, that he's been to combat 6 times, that he's seen it and done it most of the time. And the lieutenant, especially if he didn't go to West Point or didn't participate in ROTC, he doesn't have any of that. He has basically book smarts. And so there is a inevitable bumping of heads. And I've had officers pull the book out and said, hey, this isn't the way you react. Oh, ambush or whatever. The book says this. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't work. And let me show you why. So hopefully everyone's got an open mind. And I think that's the biggest reason. Those are the two biggest reasons that I've identified why two smart people might disagree.
Okay, so you said a couple of things there. I just want to recap what I think I heard you saying, Randy. One, it seems like you're agreeing with the premise. Yes, definitely people disagree. And you jumped into, so that's good. We have something to talk about today. And then you gave what you think are two main causes, and you just identified a third, but didn't get into it. But the two that I heard you saying are, listen, people have different sources of information. And the information that you're consuming is, of course, going to influence what you think about an issue. And the information sources that we're consuming suffer from two problems. One is that they are incomplete, as just mentioned. You might have looked a little bit and found something, but that's just part of the story. The other one, which is, I don't know if it's worse today than it used to be, it seems to be more extreme, and that is that the sources of information you're consuming might themselves be biased. So you think you're reading a newspaper article that has someone giving you objective information, but oops, it turns out that news source itself is biased. And I think that's gotten worse. And then secondly, people have different levels of smarts. You called it book smarts versus street smarts. Did you get a college education or not? And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your intelligence. It just has to have, it means you're bringing different experience to the table. I learned something about this and I learned about it because of a paper I read versus I learned something about this because I've done it 15 times and I think I know how to do it. So all of those can create the conditions for people to see what an outside observer would say. Here's the same situation. You guys are looking at the same problem, and yet you're coming at it from a very different perspective. So the starting point of the individuals having the discussion or doing the thing are different just by virtue of what got you to the table up to that point. So far, so good. The last thing you mentioned, which I think is worth spending a moment on, is you said you hope people come to their discussions with an open mind. I think that's probably not something that we should safely assume and just say, yeah, sure, everyone comes to discussions with an open mind. I don't think that's the case. I think people come to discussions believing that they're good people and acting in good faith, but they are the farthest thing from having an open mind about that discussion. And that's just because of human nature and psychology. We believe what we think is right, and it's hard to operate under conditions of uncertainty. And therefore, whether you think so or not, you probably do have an opinion about a topic. And when you start talking about it with someone, that it turns into not exploring this topic with an open mind so much as, well, I'm going to defend my position. I'm probably not describing this well. I guess what I am trying to say is, the attitude that you come into a discussion with, are you trying to explore this from, doesn't matter to me what the answer is, I'm just interested in getting at the truth? Or do you immediately jump to the default status of defending a position? I feel like people are in that latter mode. They take a position and they defend it, whether it makes sense to do so or not. So that open-mindedness is something I would definitely place a question mark next to, Randy.
No, I agree. I think my mention of it was I wish people would come to the table open-minded, not so much that I think I agree with you that it's becoming less popular. I've been toying around with TikTok, unfortunately, lately, and some of the lives that I've seen are questions that I'm like, I guess I need to be open-minded. Why are we asking this question? And it's things like, we landed on the moon, and the U.S. landed on the moon in 1969. And prove me wrong. And then they have people who have a discussion that think that it didn't happen. And they have a discussion with this person and they go back and forth and they talk about the photos and the flag and the wind and then everything else. And so some of those are really interesting. I'm interested to hear why people, because I do believe we landed on the moon, and I'm interested to hear why people don't think that, and what their proof, or they come to the table with evidence that they've been exposed to. And I'm like, so I might Google something as I didn't know that, and then I'll Google it, and I'm like, nope, didn't convince me. And then, but they have a variety of questions on these lies sometimes that are really interesting. Another one is, the world is round, prove me wrong, and a bunch of other things that I had held to be true, and so I can hear them discuss. And the good thing about the lies is, if someone starts getting annoyed and really annoying, they can be kicked off. Now, most of the people that start these lives don't get annoyed. They just want to have a discussion. And when the other people start getting irate and loud, they're just like, okay, goodbye. But I think live debate becoming a lost art, because it's more, this is the way it is. And if you don't believe it, then not only are you stupid, but you're offending me and you should be put in jail or something like that. And I find, and maybe it shows my age, that's not freedom of speech, and it's very archaic, and I don't approve of it. I don't know how else to say it, but I see it on the news sometimes. I see articles about it. I see it on social media where people don't want to have a discussion at all. They just want you to change your mind, and I don't think anyone's going to change their mind when you're yelling at them. I know I won't.
That phenomenon, and I think it's definitely more prevalent in the last 10 years than I've ever seen it, that people aren't willing to have a discussion. They just shut it down. and yell at you or just say, you're an idiot, I'm not going to talk to you. That's usually, it's easy to say that's a sign of someone who doesn't have a strong argument. If you can't defend your argument against someone who disagrees with you, you might need to ask yourself, I wonder if my argument is as valid as I think it is. When you jump to criticizing the person rather than debating the merits of your idea or defending the merits of your idea, I think for our listeners here who are looking to be wrong less often, you should ask yourself, is that because I feel like I can't defend that idea objectively? If you can't have a rational discussion, that suggests something as much about you as it does about the other person. So that's something, a possibility just to keep open in the back of your mind. Hey, wait a minute, how come I'm reacting defensively to this topic? Well, yes, I agree with you on that one. There's a quote that I had heard attributed to Warren Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger, which goes to, I think, the heart of what we wanted to talk about today, which is Charlie Munger supposedly says every now and then when he's having a disagreement with Warren Buffett, I'm right, I'm right, and you're smart, with the assumption that there is one right conclusion and that if Warren Buffett stops and thinks about it because he's smart, he'll come to the same conclusion as Charlie Munger. I don't think that's actually true. And I don't think it's true for two reasons. One was all the ones we just said, which is you can be smart, but still looking at incomplete information. You could be smart and still coming to two quick conclusions. In fact, I think that is a feature of humanity. We are, and the smarter you are, the more risk you have of falling prey to this. And that is, we're really good at making quick decisions from incomplete information. It's a survival advantage when you have just one or two bits of information and you can react very quickly and come to a conclusion very quickly. That's something that we've learned how to do over a long period of surviving in a tough world. And so it's not that the more information you have necessarily, the better decision you're going to make. You might have made a really good decision based on just a few bits of information. So that's one problem. We come to conclusions too quickly. Another one is, and this I think is reflected in the political discussions and discussions that people have today, there's motivated reasoning. You want to come to a certain answer because this is how I feel about gun rights or free speech rights or abortion. And so it doesn't matter what the full picture is. You've got your predetermined conclusion. You're just looking for anything to hang your hat on. So I guess for me, the common thread in all of that is we think we're smart and objective and can deal with stuff, but actually we're wired to make quick snap decisions, and we're also quite emotional in our decision making. So that gets in the way of what I would think you could describe as a rational, objective decision making process. I don't think people are rational and objective in their decision making. In other words, I think we're emotional and then justify our decisions, no matter how smart we are.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything to add to that. You pretty much said exactly what I agree with. And maybe this is going off on a tangent. And you can reel me back in about what we're talking about here when you said you wanted to make it more interesting by saying two smart people. But I think there's something to be said about people underestimating other people's intelligence just by what side of the politics they're on, or what they do for a living, or just by merit of the other person not having a college education, as we already mentioned. And I think that kind of levers into why they can't agree, because one person, even if you have two smart people, one person may think they're smarter than the other person. And I've seen this come into play when I talk to doctors and dentists and things like that, who are experts in their field. And then I say, I got a question for you. And they're like, that's not appropriate in this scenario. And I'm like, I think we discussed this earlier, where when I go to a doctor, whatever's bothering me is super important to me or my family. And the doctor has a bunch of patients and he's busy all day, and he may or may not be read up on all the newest stuff that's going on there. And so I have a question about that. This is the way we treat whatever I think's wrong with you. And I was like, what about this and this? It's like, I haven't heard about those, so I think we should go with this. And I'm like, I don't know. I think I want a second opinion. And in this case, the doctor probably thinks I'm an idiot because he's the doctor and who am I? And I think that he doesn't have an open mind because I did some research and he hasn't been able to invalidate my research. And I think there's a better way. So I think and what I'm saying, I guess those are two smart people. One's just a specialist. And I think there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, you raised some really good points there. I would say when you're talking to someone who is either quote unquote smarter than you or has some credentials on a topic, so they're the expert, the natural question comes up, okay, are the people on a level playing field? And I think my first thought with respect to that scenario is if the response to a person asking a question or challenging the supposed expert is to attack the person and say, oh, you're dumb, you don't know as much about this, or you're not an expert, I went to school for 15 years, that's not getting to the substance of the question, is it? That's attacking the person. So whenever you see in a discussion a diversion from the substance, then that's not an appropriate response. It's okay for anyone, regardless of expertise, to ask a question and to potentially challenge the expert. So on that one, I would say, yeah, when you see a person saying, no, you're not qualified to ask me that question, that's a sign that they're not willing to defend the substance of their point. And there may be good and valid reasons for it. So this could be a person saying to a physicist, I don't believe in atoms, you got to justify your position. Some objections are more well-founded than others, but the basic point of, are you attacking the substance of the position or the person? That'll reveal whether you're having a good faith discussion. The second one is, and I'm going to add a third one, but the second one that you said is a difference in incentives or motivation. If you care more deeply about an issue, you might pay much more careful attention to multiple information sources. You might have done your research, and it's exactly for the stuff that you care most about that you're more likely to do that. So if you're one of 20 patients that the doctor sees that day, yeah, you're quite likely to have spent a lot more time thinking about your issue than the doctor is. So those both go against the giving the expert, as it were, or the specialist, the assumed correctness of their position. They absolutely might not be correct for both reasons. All right. And the third one I want to get to is that actually sometimes being smarter makes you less capable of performing well. And there's lots of studies to support this. For example, you're more likely to fall prey to believing a conspiracy theory if you're more intelligent. And that goes against what people assume, but more intelligent people make those quick connections I was talking about earlier. They're able to say, oh yeah, that could have happened that way. The plausibility connection more easily. And so they more likely to fall prey to believing a conspiracy theory. That's one problem with an expert. And the second problem with experts that I see frequently is that a person who got good at one topic, let's say you studied economics and became an economist and you work for a Federal Reserve Bank somewhere, you're really good at your topic. They tend to assume they're good at whatever they turn to. And so, no, maybe you don't know anything about the properties of ethanol versus diesel versus gas. That's totally outside your area of expertise. But because you're expert in one topic, you tend to assume you're going to be good at other topics. And that is not the case. And third, even worse, or fourth, whatever it is, if you're making a prediction, even in your area of expertise, you're less likely to make an accurate prediction than someone who is not an expert. And that sounds totally counterintuitive now. Hey, wait a minute. An economist is going to make a worse prediction about the economy than a non-economist? And the answer is very often yes. I read a really interesting book about super forecasters, people who are able to make predictions about all sorts of topics. And there are a certain category of person who is able to make really much better predictions than average people, much better predictions than lay people, experts. Expertise creates blind spots for you. You rely too much on, no, this is what I learned in law school, this is what I learned in college, and you don't open yourself up to new information. We've talked about openness a couple of times, Randy, and for me, the thing that ties these together is when you come into a discussion with somebody, whether they're an expert or whatever about any topic, do you have an open mind? Are you capable of listening to new information, listening to new arguments? It's really hard to make good decisions if you don't listen to and take in new input.
No, I agree. I'll give an example, another example from my military. I was a Green Beret medic. I don't know if we talked about that. We talked about other pieces of my career. And one of the things that I have to do is figure out what possible sicknesses my guys might experience in different, was it malaria, is it cholera? How would I treat that with the right medicines and make sure I bring enough for everybody and things like that. And I have a mentor that's an actual physician in my unit that I can go to, and he's the one that helps issue the medicine. He's no, don't use that one. This is the new one or whatever. But he's a physician. He went to medical school. He may even be a surgeon. He specialized in something, but he probably didn't specialize in malaria in South America. And someone somewhere made a protocol to, this is what we're going to give. This is the standard of care for malaria prevention and malaria treatment in South America when you go there. And there was a time when we had different kinds of malaria, and they said, hey, if you're in Central America, if you're above the southern border of Panama, this is the kind of malaria these are the mosquitoes, the malaria that the mosquitoes are going to bring. And if you're below that border, then they're going to be this kind of malaria. So you're going to take different kinds of weekly medicine depending on where you are in Central and South America. And I was like, but what if the mosquitoes fly over the border? They were screwed. And he's this proponent for the most part, if you just take this, I was like, but there's another medicine we could take. It's a daily medicine, doxycycline, and the pilots take it. And there's a lot of, all medicines have side effects. And the side effects for these medicines that they wanted to give us on a weekly basis were like nightmares and just night vision. It would affect your night vision. We're going to be doing stuff at night. So I was like, yeah, that's because it would affect their night vision. Won't it affect our night vision? Won't it affect our sleep cycle? It's like, well, the pilots have a regimen. This other one has, in my opinion, less chance of really less side effects. Can we just take this daily one? It's like the protocol for Green Berets in Central South America is to take this weekly one. And I was like, because why? Who made the protocol and why'd they make it? And they're like, this is the protocol and this is what you have to do. And if you don't do it and someone gets malaria, you're going to get in trouble. And I was like, I don't understand what the protocol, why it's the protocol. It doesn't make sense to me. And it was this argue back and forth. And I was like, what if on the weekly pill, the guy he throws up, he can't tolerate it. Then you can give him the daily one. I was like, so is the daily one just as good as the weekly one? Yeah, it does the same thing. It's just one's daily and one's weekly. So then I go up the chain. I pursue this because I'm interested. And I finally find a guy, and he's like, the reason it's a protocol is because it's easier to make them remember to take it once a week than it is every day. If they don't do it every day, they're not protected from malaria. So if they miss one day, they're done. But if they miss their weekly one by a day and they take it the next day, then they're still safe. So it's basically, if I can ensure that they take it every day, like a vitamin, as opposed to every week, and I had to remind them on every Monday, we call it Malaria Monday. Malaria Monday, everyone take your malaria pill. Then it's the same. And he's like, yeah, but no, you can't guarantee that. I was like, this sounds silly that you made a protocol because you assumed that a grown man who's supervised by other grown men who are actually interested in this grown man's health can't make him take a pill every day. And we made that decision. And I was like, and so therefore we can't see at night, and we're going to have bad dreams and not good night's sleep for our missions. I'm just saying, it just doesn't make sense. You're the doctors, right? But you're not on the ground. I don't want to not be able to see at night better. I don't want to have sleep bad at night. I don't think this is a really good decision. So flash forward 10 years, and the protocol is the daily one. For some reason, someone changed the protocol. It's probably a guy who was a Green Beret and became a doctor, and then got up to the protocol level and said, "This is dumb." But and then they have a new pill now, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, so that's an example of smart people, specialized with better medical abilities than me, not questioning the protocols for whatever reason. I don't know why. Probably because they had better things to do.
It's a good story, and it illustrates a big problem with discussions and potential decision-making when you're having a disagreement with someone. What's the objectives of the participants to that discussion? The doctor that you're talking with says, look, I'm responsible for thousands of people. I can't be involved in every single decision. I can't watch what they're doing. They know better than you did that actually one of the biggest problems with any prescription is getting people to actually take it, even if it is a matter of life and death, right? That you are going to die if you don't take this pill every day. A startling number of people don't do it. So for them, the idea of making the prescription easier, even if it creates a slight, or maybe there are other even serious complications, the benefit of being able to say, all right, once a week is better than every day because I have a much better chance of them actually doing it. That's a valid concern. Whereas your concerns as being the one responsible for the safety of the people on the mission and their efficiency and performance seems considerably more important to you than making it easy to take a pill once a week versus once a day. So you two had a disagreement because you came at it with a different objective in mind. And I think part of good decision making and good discussions is simply trying to identify not whether the facts are wrong, because you guys both had good facts. You were just looking at different aspects of the problem. It's what's the person's objective. That comes up a great deal in good faith discussions, let's say, because you guys are both good faith trying to come up with what's the right way to approach this. When smart people and good intentioned people who are behaving in good faith disagree, that's a very interesting area then, because now we're saying, all right, we're both trying to achieve a good outcome, but you're not trying to achieve the same outcome. The doctors are, in that case, we're trying to achieve, I want to make sure people stick to the regimen, and you're trying to achieve, I'd like to have the least impact to the men on the mission. And so identifying when those differences occur is one way to say, hey, wait a minute, we're talking about the same thing. We're looking at two different objectives. I'd like to achieve both reasonable efficacy in the treatment and reasonable efficacy in the performance of the soldiers. That can help resolve what appear to be differences at first, but actually aren't differences at all. You're not being stubborn and a pain in the ass. You've got a good and valid reason for raising that issue. That can be a good way to improve the quality of decision-making, Randy, is just to realize when the person that you're talking with has a different objective in mind than you do. I see this in terms of risk management, for example. People say, this is the procedure, we're going to follow the procedure. They might know that the procedure is not perfect, but they don't want to be the one to change the procedure, because guess what? Then they're responsible for the consequences of there was an unanticipated bad outcome. I agree with Randy that I don't want people to have bad night vision and not sleep well. But what if people grow a third toe or something and you didn't know about it? No, they didn't know about it. The risk is going to be on the person who changed the protocol, not you. There's lots of hidden motives, I would say, in addition to the ones that came up in the discussion and that we can easily identify. There's other ones: the fear of making a mistake, the fear of being blamed for something that happens after the fact, that leads to what I would call suboptimal decision making, because you and the other person are very likely not looking at all aspects of the problem, because frankly, it's too time consuming. Who has time to go through it carefully and say, all right, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? For the same reason that we quickly identify patterns, we also relatively quickly get uncomfortable with open-ended discussions. So we say, come to the table with an open mind. Yeah, you can do that, but for how long? You can't be Socrates-like, because the townspeople are going to get really annoyed and give you a poisoned apple before very long at all if you're questioning everything all the time. So how do you find the right level of maybe just identifying your assumptions like you did, or not your assumptions, but your objectives, and say, look, my objective is to have my soldiers not have problems with their vision and to be sleep deprived. Is there another way to achieve this? To state your objectives, to ask the question, then not to give the answer, but just to say, can you help me achieve these objectives? When I was negotiating with people, I saw it in the business context in this way, Randy. When it looked like we were at loggerheads and disagreeing, one side wants this and one side wants this, sometimes I found, and in a negotiation, you're never supposed to give away your position and tell people what you want. You're supposed to trick them into get there without revealing your secret objective. I found that to be terrible advice. When I was transparent, said, look, this is what I'm trying to achieve, and here's why I want it. Can we think of a way to get there that solves my problem and doesn't cause you a problem? That's where I found the best success, is just by saying, this is what I'm trying to achieve, can you help me? The mental image in my head is I wanted to find a way to be seen as sitting on the same side of the table as the other person. Let me know what your objectives are, and I'll try and find a way to help you achieve what you want. That's the phrase win-win is overused, but it comes about from understanding what each side to a discussion is trying to achieve. And I think that actually has a lot of potential. Take even very controversial discussions. Should people be willing, or under what circumstances can a person have an abortion? All right, there's some very black and white areas where it is, from a moral and religious perspective, no one should ever have an abortion under any circumstance. All right, not much you can talk about, but short of that, there's a lot of potential common ground where you could say, what are you trying to achieve? What am I trying to achieve? And are there ways that we can satisfy both sides' objectives?
Yeah. Basically, it goes back to being open-minded, right? On both sides.
Open-minded from the perspective of not that Randy has different facts or bad facts, or Randy is acting in bad faith and defying me, but more, my open-mindedness can come about from just trying to understand what is driving the other person's. Yeah, if you know what's driving the other person, you get a better chance of coming to an understanding with them.
So basically what you're saying is be open-minded to receive, but also you can move the conversation forward by being willing to negotiate, for lack of a better word, or at least ask open-ended questions to get to what the goals of everyone at the table are, so that we can come to some kind of consolidated answer.
And in a way, you take some of the pressure off from one person being right and one person being wrong. I'm not challenging you, Doc, on the efficacy of this 1-week pill. And I totally understand there's good and valid reasons. And by the way, that it's the protocol. I'm just asking, I have these concerns. Is there a way to address those concerns? So now you're turning that person into not an adversary, but a person who's there to help you solve a separate problem that you have. And taking away that pressure, because none of us likes to be seen to be wrong in front of somebody else. It's very painful to admit, oh yeah, I was totally wrong about that. And now I have to change my mind openly. That's hard to do. But if you say, hey, you're right, I agree, I understand all that. And here's something that was on my mind. Is there a way to deal with this problem or this problem? And especially when you're talking with an expert, acknowledging their expertise, not openly challenging them in a way that's going to make them defensive. Those are all just common sense tactics, I would say, to help increase the likelihood that you're going to have a good discussion with them. No one likes to be directly challenged, and that tends to make a discussion go bad anyway.
I'm pretty sure the doctor just thought I was a big headache.
Quite likely, right? Because one of the incentives people have is just getting stuff done and moving on with their day. So a person who comes in and maybe they've heard this argument 15 times before and they don't want to have the discussion again. Maybe they just want to move on. And particularly in a hierarchical organization, like I guess the military can sometimes be, there's a boss and there's a subordinate, and the boss has made a decision. And after a certain point, discussion has to stop, right? You just got to implement. So all of that plays a role as well. Is the person tired? Are they busy? Do they just want to get you out of their office? You're not going to be able to have 2-hour armchair discussion about every topic in every circumstance. So understanding what sort of a discussion and what sort of a setting you're in, probably quite good and quite helpful. I sometimes get into trouble talking with friends and family because you'll be surprised by this, Randy, but I love to argue about stuff. I love to take the opposite side of an issue and just discuss it in the way that would be a 2-hour open armchair discussion. And it's because I enjoy the process of debate and discovery. And I enjoy that more than I do coming to an answer. And so sometimes people say, I don't understand. You keep on changing your position. What do you really think? And I'm like, what I think doesn't matter. I'm just interested in exploring basically this topic. And so when you say something and I challenge you on it, it's not that I believe what I'm challenging. It's just, I want to explore a little bit why you believe what you believe. And sometimes that annoys the hell out of people because they say, no, you have to believe something. And if you're not arguing what you think, then you're not arguing in good faith. And I think it's the exact opposite. If I come with too strong a position, then I'm not any more open to seeing how I feel. Maybe I can explain that in another way. For a lot of my career, for the reasons I just mentioned, that I didn't have time to negotiate with 15,000 employees about what the new guideline was going to be, even though I knew people would have an opinion and a good faith opinion. Many times I turned right to the top-down command approach and said, nah, I'm making this decision. This is what it's going to say. You go do it. And that's expedient, but it doesn't make people feel good. Then you can force it, but they don't necessarily then think that was the best decision. So what's the alternative? For me, the alternative was, because I still can't negotiate with 15,000 people, being open. And this was a change I had to make in my own thinking, being open to the possibility that there was more than one way to do something. That is really hard to do because that introduces uncertainty into your day. That person's idea, I don't have to entertain 10 ideas, but if I entertain 3 ideas, and I'm genuinely open to the possibility that any one of those 3 has pros and cons and might be right, I embraced that thought. And it was liberating in the same way that it was time consuming. Yeah, I have to now consider 3 ideas and really entertain them in good faith. But at the same time, it freed me up to say, okay, this way will work. This way will work. All of them are going to have trade-offs. And I stopped holding on so tightly to any one possible way to go forward. And maybe that's something I would encourage people to consider, in addition to the other advice we've already given today, Randy, about recognizing people come with different information, different experience, different objectives. Keep an open mind, both about the facts, but also about having a discussion and understanding what people are trying to achieve. And the last one I would suggest for the moment is be open to the idea that there's more than one way to achieve an objective, and that whichever way you choose is going to have pros and cons. And if you have a continuous improvement mindset, you can work with different approaches. So let's say you're back in the jungles looking to prevent your soldiers from getting malaria. You want to go to the weekly pill approach at that moment because that's the best under the circumstances. You try it out, right? You try it out and hope to get some real world experience. You come back from a mission and say, okay, that actually, Doc, you were right. We missed 3 days in the middle because we got busy and I forgot. And so maybe I will try some other approach. In other words, you can what I want to say is not that one side's right and one side's wrong. It's just that you can work with a situation, try stuff out and move on. You're laughing. I don't know. Did I say something wrong, Randy?
It's the example is not a really good one for that because if he gets malaria, there's going to be an investigation and they're going to go, were you taking the weekly pill? What happened was I was trying out something new and it didn't work out that way.
So sometimes
that's
experimentation
probably a bad example.
Sometimes it's safer than others. Maybe I'll go back to my guideline in the corporate context. Go ahead.
However, it would have made in this case, and maybe something to consider when you make, because businesses, like you said, you're talking to a bunch of people and you have to make some protocols, and there may be some question of what is that protocol the right way to go forward or not. And I don't know, some people may be intimidated to ask the higher supervisors is why are we doing it this way, and some people may not. But if you know it's going to be controversial, or if you, after you make this decision, you hear a lot of people questioning it, maybe it's to your advantage to make, well, in the Army, we call the standard operation procedures. And you say, hey, this is the protocols because of the following reasons. You shouldn't have to explain yourself every time. Some stuff's probably common sense. But if you know it's going to be controversial, you'll probably calm the air by explaining why you made this decision. And you may even say, there are probably a bunch of ways to do this, but we all have to be aligned. And therefore, I'm making this decision this way. And I'm open to improving it in the future, but I want to let this stand for a while and see what happens, or something like that.
I like that a lot, Randy. It builds in both elements that I was trying to tease out, and you did it in a shorter way. One is you explain your reasoning a little bit, because that lets other people understand, hey, this is what they're trying to achieve. It's actually quite helpful to treat people as adults. They're smart. They like knowing what you're trying to achieve. And the second one is showing a little bit of humility, saying, all right, we know this isn't perfect. There's going to be pros and cons. That also goes a long way towards letting people work with you. They say, all right, the boss knows this isn't great, but this is what they're trying to achieve, and this is the best we can do under the circumstances. That encourages people to make a suggestion. Not all of them will be good, but some of them will. So I do that approach very much, showing a little bit of humility in both explaining yourself and in being open to the fact that there might be another way. And so that leads me to a way to potentially wrap this up by saying, in fact, not only do smart people not agree all the time, but if you find yourself agreeing with people all the time, you should stop and say, hey, wait a minute, that means we're not having a good discussion. We're not getting into hidden assumptions, hidden facts. So smart people shouldn't agree. They really shouldn't.
Yeah, discussion is good. Arguing is okay. And just saying you're wrong and walking away is probably not the best solution for anything.
So that's something I think we can agree on, Randy. And I think we've explored it in some detail. So hopefully people don't think we've jumped past the reasoning behind it. I would offer to listeners to say that if you have some suggestions for stuff you think we missed, we're open to hearing about it and making the discussion better. Please leave us a comment. Let us know what's on your mind. And we appreciate you listening. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Talk to you guys next time.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.